if I remember correctly. I think I ended up pleading guilty. Obviously, you know, I was guilty, and going through that process, as I say, it was a real eye opener for me. It kind of it almost cemented my views and my opinions. It didn't make me think, oh, I wish I'd never done this, or, you know, I'm not going to do that again. It almost emboldened me to want to carry on, because it made me realise that I had actually been doing the right thing. And people might think, well, that's ridiculous. You've just been caught, prosecuted and sent to prison.
GPs up and down the country will now be able to prescribe medicinal cannabis. At first, individuals were allowed medicinal cannabis if approved by a special panel, but in recent weeks the case for full-on legalisation was boosted with the government's own drug advisors backing medicinal cannabis.
The rules and processes that have stood in place for 40 years feel out of date and are causing unnecessary suffering.
The status of cannabis will now be changed. It had been judged to have no therapeutic value, but its use was allowed for research. But now, doctors will be able to prescribe medicinal cannabis provided products meet safety standards.
I think I first started using cannabis when I was around about 14. Obviously at school at the time. It was quite popular across the board. It wasn't just sort of, you know, the preserve of, you know, a small minority. I think it was just that particular period in time when we got involved in using cannabis, when there really did start to be quite a significant change in a lot of people's views, particularly of my generation, towards recreational drug use. That's kind of where it all really started for me. And there really was no discussion at all about whether or not, you know, it had any medicinal benefits. My name's Mike Dobson. I'm the owner and founder of Cannabliss Dispensary, the U.K.'s first independent private pharmacy specialising in dispensing medical cannabis. It's been a life's work for me, particularly over the past few years, to try and establish a business that would fit into a regulated, legalised cannabis market here in the UK. Cannabis is the Latin word for the plant, which comes in a number of different varieties. It's classified as a drug, as a controlled drug under the Misuse of Drugs Act. Effectively, it is cannabis. There is no real difference between what's available on prescription and what most people associate with the black market. The main difference is obviously medical cannabis has been produced under a licence, regulated by the government, and is controlled under medical regulations. It can be used to treat a whole range of conditions, from insomnia, eating disorders, mental health related issues, pain. There is a broad spectrum of people that come into the shop, from younger people, maybe in the late teens, early 20s, to you know, people in the late 60s, 70s. So it's a broad spectrum of people, male and female, across the board. So it's good. There isn't really a bias, not that I've witnessed yet, at least anyway. Even with the branding and the name that I eventually settled on, I knew that there was going to be a big hill to climb in terms of changing public opinion and public view about people that use cannabis. It's always been very much seen as in a negative connotation. If, you know, when I was growing up, it was generally something that you didn't talk about. You know, you wouldn't have said, "No, I use cannabis." Things are very different now for individuals that are maybe very similar to myself, who've been, you know, consuming cannabis, and I'm quite happy to hold my hand up and say abusing it on the black market, because it's much easier to abuse something when it's completely unregulated, as the drugs market is. It's really a big passion for me to want to help educate and support those people in making the right choice now to look at getting access through the legal process, which is going to see a specialist doctor. So I'm very passionate about seeing or helping as much as we can through educating and using the platform that we have here as a dispensary to sort of build trust in those people to want to move away from that and actually get it legally on prescription. The start of my first video diary. Good morning everyone. Just about to go out for my morning walk. Before I do that, I have to tend to one of the ladies in my life, which I'm going to show you now. Oh look, there we are. It's good morning. Okay, my lovely. Okay, so just finished feeding the cat. This is me at the start of my new morning routine I've been doing for the past 7-8 months now. Coming out for a walk first thing in the morning. So I'd like to take you on a little walk around Preston.
My father turned around and said, my father don't get on with them. The reason why my dad don't get on with John Gavin at the time. But he turned around and said,
Somebody's had a late night. I think one of the most beautiful things that you can ever witness is the birds first thing in the morning. It's just incredible. These tiny little, like grown-up dinosaurs. They just make the most wonderful noises. I love it. It's a very surreal experience. I walk around on my walk in the morning, and I just suddenly realised that I've got to go and open a legal cannabis dispensary here in my hometown in Preston. And it's just the weirdest thing ever. I'll leave it down, I'll catch up with you when I get home. My story's quite unique because of, as I say, of what happened with my father growing up. I inherited a condition that unfortunately brought his life to an end early. So I kind of grew up with this dark cloud hanging over me that, you know, I never believed that I would live beyond the age of 30. You know, that was sort of something that was kind of ingrained in me almost from very early age. So it was really when I sort of I got past the age at which my father had died, which was 28. I started to, I guess, really start to think, well, you know, I'm still here. Am I going to be here in another 10 years' time? And started to really properly, that was when I started to go more into myself and sort of ask some deeper questions about where I was and what I was doing. So for about 12 months, I had a period where I'd come off using tobacco and come off using cannabis. And without going into the technicalities of it, I'd been suffering quite badly with side effects from the medication that I took for the condition that I have. And I'd never experienced them before, even though I'd been on the medication for about 6 or 7 years. And it turns out that it was highly likely, it wasn't proven, but it was highly likely that using cannabis was mitigating the side effects quite significantly. So I ended up using cannabis again within the space of a week or so of having a consultation with my doctor and sort of concluding that cannabis had probably been helping, and found that immediately I was getting relief again from the symptoms from the medication. At the time, you know, I was working and renting my own property. I didn't have a huge amount of money to spend on cannabis, so I wanted to make sure that what I was getting was sufficiently strong enough and consistent quality enough for me to be able to rely on. So I realised the only way to do that was to grow my own. I started to look into the complexities of growing your own, what was involved in growing indoors under lights. Cannabis growing in the UK really started to become quite prevalent. When I first started using cannabis, the products that we were buying, typically all of them were imported from abroad. It was really off the back of technological advances that enable people to grow indoors, the development of special growing lights that enable people to grow without using sunlight. So I decided that I would give it a go. I became very good at it. It was something that I enjoyed immensely because I already had quite an affinity with the plant itself. I'd never really believed truly that it was something that should be criminalised for growing it and using it. It just, the whole notion of that to me just seemed ridiculous. So it was probably, I don't know, maybe 2 years after I had first started growing for myself that I first got caught growing. Whether or not it was the right thing or not to do, I decided to represent myself, going through the court process, and I subsequently, if I remember correctly, I think I ended up pleading guilty. Obviously, you know, I was guilty, and going through that process, as I say, it was a real eye-opener for me. It kind of, it almost cemented my views and my opinions. It didn't make me think, oh, I wish I'd never done this, or, you know, I'm not going to do that again. It almost emboldened me to want to carry on, because it made me realise that I had actually been doing the right thing. And people might think, well, that's ridiculous, you've just been caught, prosecuted and sent to prison. But because of how I'd approached my defence and some of the issues that I'd raised and the way I presented myself in court, the feedback that I got from some of the police that were involved, court staff in particular, and the judges that were involved in my case was, dare I say, it was really one of respect. Landing in prison for the first time was a shock, not really because of, you know, what most people associate prison. It was more, I was more shocked to see just how many people that have been suffering with so many different issues that has got them on the wrong side of the law, that have ended up in prison themselves. Very much related to the drugs market. I would say, from my own experience, at least 80% of people that were in prison, maybe more, were in prison because of some association with, you know, the black market, the criminal drugs market. So that was the first time I got prosecuted and sent to prison for growing cannabis, which it wasn't a nice experience at all. I'm not going to lie. It was quite a horrendous experience going through that process. And when I got out of prison the first time, I was even more determined to carry on with what I was doing, because it kind of, a lot of the experience that I'd had going through the process sort of reaffirmed what I was, you know, what I'd uncovered and what my beliefs were. So I decided to carry on, and subsequently, you know, 4 or 5 years later, I found myself falling at the wrong side of the law again. I got caught growing again back in 2015, I think it was, or late 2016. And this was around about the time that I'd just started a new relationship with my current partner.
I'm Abigail Batilli. I am Mike's partner of Cannabliss, and yeah, I just work across the road at Dunelm. It was actually back in 2016, I think, if I remember correctly. It was when I was going out with an ex-partner of mine, funnily enough, and we used to go around to a friend's house and smoke weed. I'm not going to lie about that. Yeah, that's how I got to know Mike, really. It sounds really bizarre me saying that, that's just how I first met him. I didn't really understand what was actually going on at the time with his cases and stuff like that. So it kind of got a bit more serious about March. So I've been living at his place for about 3 months. So it started in January to March. And that's when I started realising, oh, it's actually quite a serious thing that he's dealing with, even though he downplayed it quite a lot.
For me, the second time round, it was much less of an issue, because I'd had that experience of being in prison. I knew the system a lot better. I knew what I was potentially facing in terms of prison time, and for me it wasn't so much of an issue. And I think Abigail put a brave face on. She tried to, I guess, dismiss a lot of her own fears about what was coming. I knew what was coming because I'd experienced it the first time. And although I'd said to her on a number of occasions, you know, it's likely that I'm going to be going to prison again for a short period of time, I don't think she truly believed it until the day that it actually happened.
And I ended up going to court with him, with his mum, and just seeing him go in the glass dock, I think it is, stood there in the back with a prison officer, and obviously the judge turned around and basically said, oh, well, it's quite a serious offence, it's not the first time you've done it, and we're going to sentence you to, I think it was 18 months, so...
She had to suffer the consequence of see me getting dragged out of court, well, not dragged out because I walked out and nobody's ever had to drag me out of court, taken away and, you know, imprisoned again.
It was weird. It was a very bizarre experience. Like, I can't really explain it unless you're actually there dealing with that yourself. Like, honestly, it's baffling to me even just going back and remembering all the things I had to go through, and obviously he had to go through.
She came to see me every week that I was in prison for the 3.5 months that I was there, which I think was certainly an experience for her, coming into an established prison, an adult prison, and seeing the other people in there as well and going through that process.
I think the amount of support that I was at least providing for him did help him through that experience as well. And knowing that he was obviously all right was great, but it did put a lot of pressure on our relationship at that moment in time. And then obviously he came out in October.
After the last experience of going into prison, I never got involved in growing cannabis again or dealing it or anything that would potentially put me at risk of going back to prison, because I truly believe that I'd found the remedy to that, which I did effectively. We now have seen the start of the legal market here in the UK off the back of some of the things that we did very early on in 2016. And would I do things differently, knowing that it had such an emotional effect on those that were close to me? No, because what we were trying to achieve was hugely important to me, and although it was again quite a negative experience going to prison for the second time, I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
Mike really enjoys learning and educating himself, and he really enjoys educating other people, and he doesn't take that for granted. I think everyone should be able to educate themselves and actually learn from other people and their understanding of cannabis, to actually make their own judgments, really.